Now, moving back to the First World War, shortly after the United States was entering the war, the British Commander General Haig, the overall commander, decided it was time to make a major push in the West once again, because it had been kind of a stalemate. There had been no major victories nor major battles in the West, on the Western Front for most of 1917. And the decision was made for the British and the French to hit an area of Belgium that was known as Passchendaele. Now, there's a tremendous amount of this detail with this battle, largely because the battle lasted 5 months, so there's a lot to cover with it. So, there was actually started in July of 1917 with British, and then also with Anzac, which are Australian New Zealand troops, also the French, and also a major portion of Canadian troops as well took place in this battle. It's very well known among them. Now, one of the things that the British did began planning early as 1915. They began tunneling underneath the German lines. And what they did there is they began placing thousands and thousands of pounds of TNT under the German lines. And at one point during the battle, they ignited that TNT, and things went thousands of feet up in the air, and thousands of Germans were killed. But there was one portion of the area where, there still was not a major breakthrough that was done. It went back and forth several times. Finally, there's one point in the battle where the Canadian troops are advancing on one particular area. It kind of started out, this section of the battle, much like the Battle of the Somme, where they had a humongous artillery bombardment of the area. And then once they thought the artillery attack had its effect, they had the men march forward. Now, what the German troops had done was a little different this time. They didn't come right out and dive on their machine guns and wipe them out. What they did is they fell back about two or three of their trenches back, and they had flares in their hands to set off to their artillery, saying, okay, when the Canadians would reach a certain area of the German trenches, the German troops that were in that area would light up the flares, and the German artillery would open up on their own line in that area and completely decimate the Canadian troops, which is exactly what happened. They marched right into it, marched straight into that trap, and the artillery completely decimated the Canadian troops. Some regiments, they're getting stuck in the mud. It had such a horrible mud and marsh in that area that it destroyed the drainage system in that area from the artillery bombardment that took centuries to build, and thousands of men and horses actually drowned in the mud. That's how bad it was. And there were some regiments of Canadian troops that suffered upwards of 70% casualties. And now this battle went on for 5 months, and there is so much that happened that we can't even begin to cover it all. But it finally came down to, in November of 1917, there was finally a decisive Allied victory in that area. The British and the French were able to actually claim victory and actually took charge of that area of Passchendaele. But there was something happening a few thousand miles to the east that would have a tremendous effect on this. The Bolshevik Revolution had happened in Russia around the same time, and Russia was going to soon be out of the war, freeing up many German troops that were fighting the Russians to be sent west to fight the French and the British and then the Americans. So while they were wearing them down, basically the position and the German troops in front of them pretty much doubled. And long story short, when the Germans did their spring offensive in March of 1918, the area that the French and British took 5 months to take from the Germans was retaken by the Germans in 3 days. Meanwhile, this time the Canadians suffered lost over 300,000 men. The British and French lost another several hundred thousand men apiece. The Anzacs lost many. The Germans lost many. All for have the line be pretty much exactly the same way it was, and had all that ground be lost a few months later. And largely what it came down to is it was suggested that the reason why Haig pushed this attack, some people suggested that it was because they wanted to take the pressure off the French, as what had happened the year before with the Battle of the Somme. But what happened also was they say that Haig was worried about being replaced as overall commander of of the British Expeditionary Force. And so he decided to push the Battle of Passchendaele for the sake of keeping his job. That has not been firmly confirmed, but that's what some people think on the matter. So there you go.